So, how does a modern, educated, sophisticated nation just fall into unimaginable darkness? It's one of history's most terrifying questions. And to even begin to understand it, we're not going to start with a big historical overview. No, we're going to start with the story of an 11-year-old boy and a single, terrifying conversation that changed his life forever.
Okay, so picture this. It's the spring of 1945. Germany has just lost the war. An 11-year-old boy named Helmuth is at home, and he overhears his father, who's a prominent doctor, say these chilling words to his mother. He's not just talking about losing a battle. He's talking about a very specific and very terrifying kind of payback. The very next day, Helmuth's father took his own life. And the boy, he was so traumatized by what he'd heard that for the next 9 years, he refused to eat a single meal at home. He was terrified his own mother might poison him. It's a shocking story, right? And to understand that father's terror, we have to rewind the clock, all the way back to the end of the First World War.
You see, the story of Nazi Germany, well, it doesn't just begin with Hitler. It really begins in the ashes of Imperial Germany. After 4 incredibly brutal years of war, the nation was defeated, their emperor was gone, and the country was left completely reeling, both psychologically and financially.
This is what that defeat looked like on a map. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was seen by so many Germans not as a peace deal, but as a deep national humiliation. It literally carved up their country, stripping away vital land and resources.
And the scale of these terms, it was just staggering. Germany lost 13% of its territory and every single one of its overseas colonies. But the punishment went even deeper, forcing it to give up 3/4 of its iron and over 1/4 of its coal. And on top of all that, they were handed a bill for £6 billion in war reparations. For many Germans, this wasn't just a treaty. It felt like a national wound, and that resentment poisoned their politics for years.
And if that national humiliation wasn't bad enough, what came next was a wave of economic disasters that brought the country to its knees and pushed its people to the absolute brink.
Now look at this image. It's wild, right? It perfectly captures this thing called hyperinflation. To pay off its debts, the government's brilliant idea was to just print more money. The result? The German mark became basically worthless. This picture of people using wheelbarrows of cash just to buy a loaf of bread, it became infamous around the world.
Just let that number sink in for a second. By December of 1923, it took over 98 million marks to equal a single US dollar. Your entire life savings? Wiped out. Poof! Gone! Overnight! The entire economic foundation of society had just crumbled into dust.
And just when it seemed like things were starting to stabilize, bam, the 1929 Wall Street crash hits, plunging the whole world into the Great Depression. And Germany, it got hit the hardest. Industrial production just collapsed. The number of unemployed people shot up to an incredible 6 million. These images, they capture that feeling of utter desperation on the streets. People lost everything, their jobs, their homes, and maybe worst of all, their hope.
So you've got this perfect storm, right? Humiliation, fear, total desperation, and it's into this chaos that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party step onto the scene offering radical, simple, and very powerful answers.
Check out this timeline. It's absolutely mind-blowing. In 1928, the Nazis were a tiny fringe party, getting less than 3% of the vote. Just 4 years later, right in the middle of the Depression, they become the largest political party in Germany. So how on earth did that happen?
Well, for one thing, they were masters of propaganda that promised a better future. Hitler understood political spectacle like no one else. These weren't just political meetings. They were huge, theatrical rallies with seas of flags and torches, all designed to create this overwhelming feeling of unity and strength for people who felt broken.
And at the center of it all was Hitler, a really powerful and passionate speaker. He promised to rip up the Versailles Treaty, rebuild the military, get people back to work, and bring back German pride. He gave people a scapegoat for all their problems and sold them a vision of a powerful, reborn nation.
So, once they're in power, Hitler and the Nazis move fast to tear down democracy and start building a new society based on the horrifying core of their ideology.
You see, at the very heart of Nazism was a complete rejection of the idea that all people are equal. It was all built on this twisted, fake science of race. In their worldview, pure Germans, who they called Aryans, were the master race at the top. And everyone else, especially Jewish people, were labeled as inferior or undesirable and simply had no place in their new Germany.
And the terrifying part is, what came next wasn't just random violence. No, it was a cold, calculated, and methodical process. It happened in 3 distinct stages that led from persecution all the way to mass murder.
So, step 1. Exclusion. This began almost right away. New laws stripped Jewish people of their citizenship. They were banned from their jobs, their businesses were boycotted, and they were segregated from public life in these really mundane but cruel ways, just like this sign on a park bench. And that's how the unthinkable starts to become normalized. One law, one sign, one act of exclusion at a time.
From exclusion, it moved to ghettoization, and then, finally, to annihilation. This image is just haunting. It shows just a fraction of the shoes taken from victims at a death camp. It really gives you a sense of the industrial scale of the killing. Millions, 6 million Jews, and millions of others were systematically murdered.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Back to that 11-year-old boy in 1945 listening in on his father's terrified confession.
So now, with all of this context, we can finally understand what was behind his fear. He wasn't just afraid of being on the losing side of a war. No, his terror was way deeper and far more personal than that.
And here's the answer. Helmut's father, the physician, had been a Nazi. He was a part of the system. He knew exactly what the regime had done, the mass murder, the horrific medical experiments, the genocide. His fear wasn't of enemy soldiers, it was of justice. He was terrified of being held accountable for his role in what the world would soon call crimes against humanity.
You know, the story of how a nation of poets and thinkers became a nation of murderers is a profound warning for all of us. It forces us to ask ourselves, what are the conditions that allow extremism to take root? And what are the warning signs that we should never, ever ignore?